Singing by myself, leader during the lockdown, is a reflection on the confinement of my leader practice to a domestic space and how these experiences resonate with the emerging themes in my research concerning domestic music making and the boundaries between private and public spheres within the early 19th century in Germany. The title of today's conference, Art Song Out of the Concert Hall, reveals a lot about how we conceive the relationship between these two things. That the concert hall is the space in which we perceive art song to reside, maybe even to belong. However, at the beginning of the 19th century, the German art song was performed almost exclusively behind closed doors, either in the living rooms of a burgeoning middle class who would play and sing Lieder for their own and their family's enjoyment, or within the infamous salon gatherings in cities such as Berlin and Vienna. What I hope to explore is how, by art song having been temporarily separated from its usual space, we have the opportunity to reflect on its origins and the experiential world of those German amateurs and salon participants who were making and listening to art song in their homes. At the beginning of the first lockdown, gifted with precious time and freed of performance commitments, I spent the best part of my days in the music room. I passed the hours score reading new songs, devising programs, practicing my piano, and singing and performing for myself. I discovered songs and even composers who I'd never heard of before, experimented with ideas of key, ornamentation, and improvisation, and had space to make music for pleasure. The way in which I was ingesting repertoire at the piano, discovering through playing and singing, bears remarkable similarities with the original means by which Lieder would have been experienced by 19th century German amateurs, who would buy song sheets to perform and discover within the walls of their own homes. To engage with songs in this way has been liberating, with time to read the text and reflect upon it, and then to explore the sound world that the composer has interpolated, connecting with the music through the sensation of touch via the keyboard, discovering the subtleties of vocal lines via the declamation of the text. Opportunities rarely afforded by the pace of professional musical life, when these processes are happening simultaneously and across several projects. As an amateur pianist myself, I have come to appreciate the compositional choices of some 19th century Lieder composers such as Carl Friedrich Zelter and Felix Mendelssohn, who were aware of the public for whom they were writing. The popularity of strophic song forms, supportive piano parts, and the folk song-like vocal writing within these Lieder are owing to the commercial demand of their music-loving public. These characteristics, especially within Mendelssohn's Lieder output, have been dismissed as unimaginative or simple, as if this quality were pejorative. However, I have come to appreciate the importance of these devices as a means to foster approachability, which have enabled me to make music in spite of my limited technical abilities. There have, of course, been opportunities available to me that were not available to home musicians in the 19th century. For as long as I can remember, the piano in my home has been an electric instrument, and the technical possibilities of these instruments have long been a tool that I have engaged in practice, namely the facility to record and play back your piano performances. This allows a single musician to accompany themselves, but without having to juggle playing and singing at once. This compartmentalization levels up my piano playing significantly, and I am less likely to make mistakes and more able to play expressively. The lockdown has seen me mining the possibilities of this approach, as I, for the first time, have relied on my own piano playing as a means to make musical performances. Despite the idiosyncratic challenges, The unique experience of accompanying oneself can be incredibly freeing, and suddenly you can perform within your own home, as if with another musician. It will come as little surprise that, as a tenor, having discovered the means to make music within my confinement, I wanted someone to perform too. This impulse led me to create numerous streamed performances across Twitter and Instagram, the most ambitious being a 28-part video series on YouTube analysing, discussing and performing art song entitled The COVID-19 Leader A to Z. The transformation of my private practice space into a site of performance leads us to consider the philosophical world of public and private boundaries. In her exploration of early 19th century Lieder, Jennifer Roniak characterised the domestic and private qualities cultivated in home Lieder performance and salon gatherings as protective, fostering environments in which reciters of poetry and performers of song were safe to explore and express their inner self, or Innigkeit. Whilst it may be difficult for today's performers to conceive of a world in which the exhibition of self was not the norm, it is not too great a stretch of the imagination, I suspect, that the majority of this conference view their homes as a space which is private. Let's take Roniak's idea of privacy as protection, and consider the protection set out by the home itself. Our homes have walls made of brick or stone. We have doors which lock, curtains which can be drawn. Our ceilings and floors filter the sounds of our voices, meaning we can speak freely and truthfully. Within these buildings, there are degrees of privacy and spaces in which we are granted further personal protections. Our bedrooms, the bathroom, the office, these are all spaces in which we can shield ourselves, even if those boundaries are sometimes crossed by our cohabitors. In this protection, this privacy is a freedom to discuss whatever we like and to do whatever we please. COVID has blurred these private boundaries of the home, as our residences have been forcibly repurposed to accommodate our working lives. The moment we log on to a Zoom call and decide to put our camera on, our private and protected place is made accessible to our work colleagues, and the dimensions of the space change. Suddenly, it isn't as private as it was before. And we acknowledge this shift in the way we prepare for signing onto a call. Perhaps we've cleaned up especially, or put a shirt and tie on above our pyjama bottoms. When we make these choices, we acknowledge the change in the space, and we seek to maintain adequate control and protections. As musicians, we have also experienced this shift, as the private space that inhabits our personal practice has had to become a rehearsal studio, a recording booth, and a concert stage. In streaming performances from home, the music room becomes less private, and yet it is still not a public space. In uncovering this sliding scale between spaces being perceived as private or public, we gain another insight into 19th century Germany and the elusive world of salon culture, known at the time as circles or Kreis. In the exhibition of musical, poetic, dramatic or intellectual events to a group of invited guests within one's home, there is a shift in the dimension of this domestic space. Not only are there more people, but there is a performative element, both on the part of the participants and of the hosts. As we all know, when at a party we want to appear intelligent, successful or funny and avoid making any faux pas. So adding curated discussion performance, and the recitation of poetry would surely make the people there more self-aware. However, in other ways, the space remained private by virtue of the protections that were in place. Guests, for example, were often only welcome by invitation or recommendation. There were philosophical ideals and even treatises, with participants being granted intellectual and social equality, at least ideologically, in a society that was rife with patriarchal and anti-Semitic issues. These salons, though performative and semi-public, were still protected, and in that sense retained a partially private identity. When the Liedt's journey into the concert hall began to take its course, and the intimacy of the lyric eye was presented for the first times in public spaces, 19th century singers were challenged to cultivate new protections for themselves as their art form was exhibited for the first time. Inversely, contemporary performers have had to ask questions about how to maintain the protections that have been offered by the concert hall, as they have been required to make performances in the domestic environment. Protections such as the separation of practice and performance space, and the mindsets that accompany this, including precious adrenaline, of having a dress code, the flattery of professional lighting. Crucially, the audience, who we can see and sing to, who we can move and be moved by. These familiarities are to artists protections. They are comforts, the constants in the unpredictable experiment of live performance. In home performance, all of these comforts are stripped away and replaced by a recording device. Recording changes everything. From the moment the flashing light turns a steady red, you become acutely aware that every breath, word, and note will be captured and preserved forever. This breeds new pressures. No mistakes, no errors, no poor judgments. We now expect perfection. As if this were not enough, we have lost the protections of the concert hall and now have to ask questions about our decisions on every level that have until now been dictated by tradition and expectations within the profession. What we wear, where we put the camera, whether we look at the camera, whether we move, whether we speak. But with the emergence of these questions comes opportunity. Whilst we have been free to question these things before, to take a decision to change even one of these elements in a concert hall performance would be to make a statement of artistic or social intent, and would not likely escape attention. In the lockdown performance, we are free to curate our own aesthetic world and to control the tone of our output. The tools at our disposal to dictate tone of streamed performances are many. The way in which we do or do not speak, the decisions we make on presentation, perhaps dressing comfortably or allowing the imperfection of a space to be seen, as if welcoming the viewers into our home. We can forego a dramatic performance, instead singing naturally without the pressure to cultivate character. We can move to the music of the piano part and smile. We can invite participation from and engage with our audience, allowing them to influence the direction and decisions within our practice, almost as if members of a 21st century online salon community. And these possibilities pose questions about our performances when we return to the concert hall. Can we only disseminate translations through a printed programme? Do we need to be positioned front and centre in the space, separated by a concert rostra? Need we dissuade audience members from clapping in between songs? The answer is simply no. The protections and comforts of our usual performance space have also acted as limitations, when we as artists should be limitless. I believe that COVID has reminded us that our art form is about people, feeling, connection, and intimacy. We now have an opportunity to re-enter our beloved concert halls with a spirit of celebration, creativity and liberation. We can carry the lessons learned from our new musical lives to better understand and connect with repertoires that have until now sat outside of the canon, perhaps previously dismissed. And we can embrace the precious opportunity of sharing music in the same spaces as our audiences, respecting them as participants as opposed to just recipients, creating a more porous and inventive art form. And it's here I want to end, with this challenge. So thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to hearing any questions or challenges that you might have for me. Thank you.